How many subscriptions are running on your accounts right now that you have not opened in 3 months? And why, exactly, have you not cancelled a single one of them? Before we go any further, this video is for educational purposes only. It explores documented research on how people make financial and organizational decisions. It is not financial advice. Always consult a qualified professional for your specific situation. Here is the uncomfortable answer. It is not laziness, and it is not that you forgot the subscription exists. Somewhere in the back of your mind sits a small, specific fact: you already paid for it. That fact should be irrelevant to whether you keep paying. The money is already gone either way, whether you cancel today or in 6 more months. But it is not irrelevant, and the pull it exerts on your decisions has a name and a body of research behind it. What follows is the same mechanism, verified at 3 very different scales: a laboratory study of business investment decisions, a national government program, and the subscription list sitting on your phone right now. Researchers call it the sunk cost effect. The foundational paper on it, by Hal Arks and Catherine Bloomer, appeared in the journal Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes in February 1985. Their finding, stated plainly, is that people are reluctant to abandon a course of action once they have invested time, money, or effort into it, even when that investment cannot be recovered and even when abandoning it is the better decision from this point forward. There is a simple economic rule this behavior violates. A rational decision maker is only supposed to weigh future costs against future benefits. Definition: gone. It cannot be brought back by continuing, and it cannot be lost twice by quitting. Human beings do the opposite of what the rule says anyway, and they do it reliably, in some of the most consequential rooms in the world. Consider a study that has nothing to do with subscriptions at all, and everything to do with the exact same mechanism at a much larger scale. In 1976, a researcher named Barry Staw published a paper titled Knee Deep in the Big Muddy, in the journal Organizational Behavior and Human Performance. When a business investment starts failing, do the people responsible for it pull back, or do they double down? To test it, he built a realistic case study. 240 business students at a large public university were told to imagine they were the financial vice president of a hypothetical company, and their job was to decide how to allocate $10 million in research and development funding between 2 divisions, consumer products and industrial products. Every subject picked a division and defended the choice in writing. Each subject learned how that choice had turned out. Half were told the division they funded had returned to profitability. Half were told it had kept declining. Then came the real test. A fresh $20 million became available for a second funding round, and every subject had to decide how much of it to put back into the division they had originally chosen, or previously inherited from someone else. Here is what the data showed. Under conditions where subjects were personally responsible for choosing the division and then watched it decline, they allocated an average of just over $13 million of the new $20 million back into that same losing division, the highest commitment of any group in the entire study. Subjects who had not made the original choice, who simply inherited someone else's pick and then learned it had failed, invested far less. Averaged across the whole study, subjects under high personal responsibility put in about $11.08 million to the division they had chosen, compared with about $8.89 million from subjects who had not made the original call. Averaged across decision outcomes, positive, while negative results drew about $11.20 million back in. The dollars themselves did not know who had made the original decision. Only the person holding the decision knew that, and knowing it changed everything about how they behaved with someone else's money. Staw's own explanation, laid out in the paper, is that decision makers facing a bad outcome they are personally responsible for do not primarily reassess the investment on its own terms. They work to demonstrate, mostly to themselves, that the original decision was sound all along, and resources toward it. The paper calls this escalating commitment to a previously chosen course of action, and Staw noted that the pattern shows up well beyond a classroom exercise. He pointed to a 1965 memo written by George Ball, then Under Secretary of State, warning President Lyndon Johnson about precisely this dynamic before the large-scale escalation of American troop commitments in Vietnam. Ball wrote, "Once large numbers of U.S. troops are committed to direct combat, they will begin to take heavy casualties in a war they are ill-equipped to fight in a non-cooperative if not downright hostile countryside. Once we suffer large casualties, we will have started a well-nigh irreversible process. The warning described the identical trap, at the scale of a nation rather than a subscription or a research budget. Staw draws one more distinction worth sitting with. Some of this pressure, he argues, comes from a simple internal need to feel like a consistent, rational person, regardless of who is watching. But a second, separate source of the same pressure comes from wanting to prove to other people, a boss, a board, a spouse, that an earlier call was the right one. Staw notes that this second motive matters most inside organizations, where a decision-maker may be genuinely uncertain of their own standing, and inside government, where a decision-maker may be answering to constituents rather than only to their own conscience. The sunk cost you are protecting is sometimes financial. Just as often, it is a version of yourself you do not want to admit was wrong in front of somebody else. There is an even more literal version of this trap, literal enough that economists sometimes use it as the informal name for the whole phenomenon. Governments jointly committed to developing the Concorde, a supersonic passenger jet. Well before the aircraft ever carried a paying customer, it became clear the economics did not work. Development costs had ballooned far past initial projections, the fuel burn made ticket prices punishing, and the real market for supersonic travel turned out to be far smaller than planners had hoped. Both governments kept funding the program anyway, for years, past the point where a fresh look at the numbers would have said stop. The term derives from the fact that the British and French governments continued to fund the joint development of the costly Concorde supersonic airplane even after it became apparent that there was no longer an economic case for the aircraft. According to the documented history of the program, the British government privately regarded the project as a commercial disaster that should never have been started. Political and legal issues made it impossible for either government to pull out. Notice what all three of these cases share. A season ticket holder is not in a corporate boardroom, and a corporate boardroom is not a national government. But the mechanism inside each one is identical to the mechanism sitting inside your own subscription list right now. The size of the number changes, $10 a month, $10 million in a research budget, or a national aerospace program running for years past its own expiration date. The psychology underneath does not change at all. Each of these three examples was drawn from a different discipline entirely, a psychology journal, a business school simulation, and the recorded history of a national engineering program, and none of the researchers behind them were describing your specific spending habits. They were describing something that shows up wherever humans hold a decision and a memory of what it already cost, at the same time. Here is what makes the pull genuinely hard to shake. The sunk cost effect does not feel like an error while it is happening. It feels like loyalty, or discipline, or simply refusing to waste something you already built. Canceling a gym membership you paid for back in January can feel like admitting January was a waste, even though the money from January is equally gone whether you cancel today or next year. Walking away from a home renovation halfway through can feel like throwing away everything spent so far, even though finishing it at a worse price, for a result you no longer actually want, is the greater waste. The same pull shows up in smaller places too. The expensive shoes you keep because you paid full price for them, even though they hurt your feet every time you wear them, or the online course you never finished but still will not delete, because deleting it would mean admitting the money is not coming back. The emotional weight consistently lands on the wrong side of the calculation, because the calculation was never supposed to include what is already spent, and instinct insists on including it anyway. None of this means every unfinished project should be abandoned, or that persistence is always the wrong move. Sometimes the honest answer, after a clear look at future costs against future benefits, is still to continue. The finding here is not an argument against persistence itself. It is a finding about persistence driven by money already gone rather than by value still ahead, and about how difficult those two motives are to tell apart from the inside. The test the research points toward is a simple one, and it works the same whether you are looking at a $14 subscription or a $10 billion aircraft program. Set aside, for one moment, everything already spent. Look only at what continuing would cost starting today, and what it would actually deliver from here. If the honest answer to that question is no, the fact that you already paid for months, or years, of it does not turn that no into a yes. So here is a question worth leaving in the comments. Think of the one subscription, membership, or half-finished project you are most reluctant to walk away from. Is your reluctance about what it is worth to you starting today, or is it really about what you already put in? I would genuinely like to read what you land on. And in the next episode, we follow the money into the subscriptions themselves, and ask why the price you agreed to a year ago is almost never the price you are quietly paying now. That is the architecture of price creep, and it is where we go next.